The massive viewscreen flickered to life across every inhabited world in the Galactic Empire. From the crystal spires of Zentera Prime to the underground cities of Morlac 7, billions of beings stopped what they were doing as an unfamiliar signal overrode all communications networks simultaneously. The image that appeared was simple yet somehow deeply unsettling, a human face, weathered and scarred, with eyes that held the weight of countless battles. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the human said, her voice carrying clearly across the void between stars. "This message is being broadcast to every world under Imperial rule. Consider this humanity's final diplomatic gesture before we take action that cannot be undone." On the Imperial throne world of Kelthera, Emperor Vexthal watched the transmission with growing irritation. The reptilian monarch's scales darkened with anger as he processed the audacity of what he was witnessing. Around him, his council of advisors shifted nervously, their various alien forms betraying uncertainty despite their attempts to maintain composure. "How did they penetrate our entire communications grid?" demanded General Korthek, his forearms gesticulating wildly. The insectoid warrior had spent decades perfecting Imperial security protocols, and this breach felt like a personal attack on his competence. "Unknown, Excellency," replied Communications Minister Veltar, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "The signal appears to be coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Our technicians cannot trace its origin or block its transmission." Emperor Vexthal's eyes narrowed to golden slits as he focused on the human woman's face. "Continue monitoring. I want to hear what these primitives think they can threaten us with." Admiral Chen continued speaking, her tone remaining calm and measured despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "For the past 200 years, your empire has systematically enslaved, relocated, and exterminated every species that refused to submit to your rule. You have claimed dominion over 3/4 of the known galaxy, and your appetite for conquest shows no signs of slowing." The Admiral paused, allowing her words to sink in across billions of worlds. On planets throughout Imperial space, beings huddled around their screens, hanging on every word. Some were loyal Imperial citizens who felt outraged by the humans' accusations. Others were members of oppressed species who dared to hope that someone might finally challenge their overlords. "When your fleets first approached Earth 50 years ago," Chen continued, "we attempted peaceful contact. We offered trade agreements, cultural exchange, and mutual cooperation. Your response was to demand our immediate and unconditional surrender. When we refused, you declared us a hostile force and began your invasion." The image shifted to show holographic displays of battle footage. Massive Imperial dreadnoughts, each the size of a small city, descended through Earth's atmosphere while smaller fighters swarmed like angry insects. The humans' initial response had been pathetic by Imperial standards, chemical rockets and primitive energy weapons that barely scratched the paint on Imperial hulls. "Your initial assessment was understandable," Admiral Chen said with what might have been a slight smile. Humanity appeared to be a young species with limited technology and no significant military capability. Your invasion force expected to complete Earth's subjugation within a standard month. General Korthak clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. He remembered those early reports from the Terran campaign. The humans had seemed so backward, so hopelessly outmatched. Their weapons were crude, their ships slow and clumsy. It should have been a simple matter of bombardment and occupation. "What your forces discovered," Chen continued, "was that humans have one particular talent that sets us apart from most species in the galaxy. We are exceptionally good at learning from our mistakes, and we learn very quickly." The holographic display now showed later battles from the Earth invasion. The difference was startling. Human ships that had been clumsy and slow now moved with deadly precision. Their weapons, while still primitive by Imperial standards, were being used with devastating effectiveness. More troubling was the clear evidence of tactical innovation. Humans were developing new strategies and technologies at an unprecedented rate. "By the end of your first year in our system," Admiral Chen said, "your invasion force had been reduced to 60% of its original strength. By the end of the second year, you had lost your forward command ship and 3 heavy cruisers. Your forces were forced to withdraw to the outer system and establish a siege rather than risk further direct engagement." Emperor Vexthal's claws extended slightly as he remembered the reports from that campaign. The initial commander had been relieved of duty after losing so many ships to what were supposed to be primitives. His replacement had fared little better, and, eventually, the decision had been made to contain Earth rather than conquer it. The official Imperial position was that the humans weren't worth the cost of subjugation. For the past 48 years, Chen continued, your empire has maintained a blockade around Earth, preventing us from expanding beyond our home system while you continued your conquest of other species. You assumed that isolation would eventually force us to surrender, or that we would simply fade into irrelevance. The Admiral's expression grew darker, and there was something in her eyes that made even the Emperor feel a chill of unease. What you failed to understand is that humans thrive under pressure. When you trapped us in our own system, you didn't weaken us. You gave us time to prepare. The holographic display shifted again, now showing images that made Imperial observers lean forward in shock. Human ships, but unlike anything they had seen before. These vessels were sleek and deadly-looking, incorporating design principles that seemed both familiar and alien. More disturbing were the weapons tests being displayed: energy beams that carved through asteroid fields like they were made of paper, and defensive shields that absorbed massive amounts of damage without failing. During your siege, we have not been idle, Chen said. We have studied every piece of Imperial technology we could acquire. We have analyzed the wreckage of your ships, reverse-engineered your weapons systems, and improved upon your designs. Most importantly, we have learned to think like you. General Korthak felt his four stomachs clench with worry. The tactical implications of what he was seeing were staggering. If the humans had truly managed to match Imperial technology while maintaining their apparent advantages in innovation and adaptability, the strategic situation was far more complex than anyone had realized. But technology alone does not make a species dangerous, Admiral Chen continued. What makes humanity truly formidable is our approach to warfare itself. Most species in the galaxy fight wars to gain territory, resources, or political advantage. Humans fight wars to win them, completely and permanently. The display now showed what appeared to be a massive industrial complex in space, clearly of human construction but incorporating Imperial technology. The scale was breathtaking, in manufacturing facilities that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, shipyards that could construct fleets, and weapons platforms that defied easy classification. For nearly 5 decades, we have been building our capacity for war. Not just ships and weapons, but the infrastructure needed to sustain a galactic conflict. We have prepared for every contingency, planned for every possible scenario, and we are ready. Emperor Vexthal found himself studying the human admiral's face more carefully. There was no boasting in her voice, no theatrical posturing. She spoke with the calm certainty of someone stating simple facts, and that made her words far more unsettling than any amount of shouting or threatening would have been. Your empire currently controls approximately 74% of known galactic space, Chen said. You have subjugated 47 different species, enslaved billions of individuals, and strip-mined entire star systems for resources. Your expansion has been methodical, ruthless, and seemingly unstoppable. The Admiral paused, and, when she continued, her voice carried a new edge of steel. That expansion ends now. Across the Empire, beings held their breath. On Zentera Prime, the crystalline inhabitants felt resonances of fear through their shared consciousness. On the mining worlds of the Cardan Nebula, enslaved workers dared to look up from their labor. On the pleasure worlds where Imperial elites lived in luxury built on the suffering of others, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Humanity hereby demands the immediate withdrawal of all Imperial forces to your original sphere of influence, Chen continued. All conquered territories must be granted independence, all enslaved populations must be freed, and all strip mining operations in occupied systems must cease immediately. You have 72 standard hours to begin this process. General Korthak's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. The audacity is beyond belief, he muttered. A single species, trapped in one system, making demands of an empire that spans thousands of worlds. But Emperor Vexthal remained silent, his ancient mind processing what he was hearing. The human admiral was not making idle threats. Everything about her demeanor suggested she was stating terms that she genuinely expected to be met, backed by force she believed could enforce them. If these demands are not met, Admiral Chen said, humanity will begin systematic military action against Imperial targets. We will not engage in the kind of territorial conquest that characterizes Imperial expansion. Instead, we will focus on what humans call strategic destruction. The display changed again, showing tactical simulations that made Imperial military observers lean forward in shock. The scenarios depicted precise, coordinated strikes against key Imperial installations, supply lines, and command structures. These weren't the crude hammer blows of primitive warfare, but surgical operations designed to cripple an empire's ability to function. Human military doctrine does not focus on holding territory, Chen explained. We focus on eliminating our enemy's capacity to continue fighting. We will target your shipyards, your command centers, your supply depots, and your industrial infrastructure. We will make it impossible for your empire to maintain its current territorial holdings. The strategic genius of this approach was not lost on imperial military minds. Traditional galactic warfare involved the slow conquest of territory, the establishment of garrison forces, and the gradual expansion of controlled space. What the humans were describing was something far more devastating, a campaign designed to cause the empire to collapse under its own weight. We do not want your planets, Admiral Chen said bluntly. We do not want to rule over conquered populations or administer distant territories. We simply want you to stop expanding, stop enslaving, and return to your original borders. This is the last time we will ask politely. Emperor Vexthal finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. And if we refuse? As if responding to his question, Admiral Chan's expression grew grimmer. Then, we will demonstrate why humanity has never lost a war that we considered truly necessary to win. Your planets will be reduced to ash before we allow your empire to continue its campaign of galactic oppression. The transmission continued for several more minutes, with Admiral Chen outlining specific expectations and timelines. But, for many viewers across Imperial space, those final words echoed with particular force. The quiet certainty with which she had delivered the threat made it clear that this was not political posturing or diplomatic bluffing. This was a species that had spent decades preparing for war, and they were ready to begin. When the transmission finally ended, the silence across Imperial space was deafening. Then, slowly, the conversations began. In government buildings and military installations, emergency sessions convened to analyze the threat. On conquered worlds, oppressed populations whispered about the possibility of liberation. In the depths of space, Imperial fleet commanders began reviewing their tactical assessments of human capabilities. Emperor Vexthal stared at the blank screen for long moments before turning to his advisors. Opinions? General Korthak's forearms gestured dismissively. Elaborate theater, Excellency. One species cannot threaten an empire of our magnitude, regardless of their technological advances. I recommend we respond with a demonstration of our own, perhaps the complete sterilization of their home system. And, yet, interjected science advisor Kelnara, her crystalline features reflecting thought patterns like light through a prism, the technological capabilities they displayed suggest significant advancement beyond our last intelligence estimates. Their claim of strategic parity may not be entirely without merit. The Emperor's tail lashed once, a sign of deep consideration. What is your assessment of their actual military capacity? Kelnara's form shifted slightly as she accessed data networks through her natural crystalline matrix. Based on the imagery in their transmission, they have achieved remarkable miniaturization of power systems and apparent breakthroughs in shield technology. Their shipbuilding capacity appears to have increased exponentially during the siege period. Irrelevant, General Korthak insisted. Numbers matter in warfare. They have one system. We have thousands. They have one species worth of industrial capacity. We have 47 conquered races working for our benefit. The mathematics of the situation are not complex. But, Emperor Vexthal was remembering something else about the human campaign, the rate at which their tactical capabilities had improved. Most species, when faced with superior force, either surrendered quickly or fought desperately with whatever resources they possessed. The humans had done something unprecedented, they had used the pressure of invasion to accelerate their development at an impossible pace. Excellency, Communications Minister Veltar interjected nervously, we are receiving reports of unusual activity in sectors bordering human space. Long-range sensors are detecting energy signatures that do not match any known Imperial technology. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Show me. The tactical display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galactic region around Earth. Scattered throughout nearby sectors were anomalous readings, energy sources that appeared and disappeared without warning, gravitational disturbances that suggested the presence of massive objects that weren't there when sensors looked directly at them. Stealth technology, General Korthak muttered, his confidence wavering slightly. But, the energy requirements for such systems would be enormous. Unless, Kelnara said thoughtfully, they have achieved breakthroughs in power generation that exceed our current understanding. The humans have had nearly 5 decades to study our technology while developing their own innovations. The combination could produce capabilities we have not anticipated. Emperor Vexthal studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human admiral had delivered her ultimatum with the confidence of someone holding superior cards. If that confidence was based on actual capability rather than desperation, the situation was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. "What do we know about human psychology?" the Emperor asked. Kelnara's crystalline form pulsed with data retrieval patterns. "Limited information, Excellency. During the initial invasion, Imperial forces noted unusual human behaviors. They appeared to value individual initiative over hierarchical command structures, showed remarkable adaptability under pressure, and demonstrated what our analysts termed irrational persistence in hopeless tactical situations." Meaning? They continued fighting even when logic suggested surrender. More troubling, they often achieved tactical victories in situations where defeat should have been mathematically certain. Our field commanders attributed this to luck or primitive stubbornness. General Korthak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Or superior tactical innovation under pressure. If they maintain those characteristics while possessing advanced technology. The implications hung in the air like a threatening storm. An enemy that combined technological capability with unpredictable tactical thinking and refusal to accept defeat was potentially the most dangerous opponent the Empire had ever faced. "Excellency," Veltar said urgently, "we are receiving priority communications from sector commanders throughout the Empire. They are requesting guidance on how to respond to potential human incursions." "And what is the status of our own fleet deployments?" "Scattered across 47 occupied systems maintaining garrison duties and suppression operations. Our mobile battle groups are engaged in 3 active conquest campaigns and 2 rebellions. Available reserves are limited." Emperor Vexthal felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. The Empire's strength lay in its vast territorial holdings and enslaved populations, but that same vastness made it vulnerable to coordinated attacks against key infrastructure. If the humans could strike simultaneously across multiple sectors, how long would it take to consolidate our forces for a massive retaliation against Earth? He asked. General Korthak consulted his tactical systems. To assemble a fleet capable of overwhelming any conceivable human defenses, approximately 6 standard months, Excellency. But such consolidation would require withdrawing forces from occupied territories and abandoning current expansion operations, which would invite rebellions and potentially destabilize our entire territorial structure, the Emperor concluded grimly. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The humans had waited until the Empire was fully extended, committed to maintaining control over vast territories with finite resources. Any major military operation against Earth would require weakening Imperial control elsewhere, potentially triggering widespread revolt among conquered populations. "Recommendations?" Emperor Vexthal asked. The council chamber fell silent as each advisor considered the unprecedented situation. Finally, Kelnara spoke. "The humans have essentially given us 72 hours to decide whether their threat is credible. Perhaps we should use that time to conduct intelligence-gathering operations. Test their actual capabilities rather than responding to unknown variables." General Korthak nodded reluctantly. A probe in force against one of their forward positions might reveal the true extent of their technological advancement. If their capabilities have been exaggerated, we respond with overwhelming force. If they prove more dangerous than anticipated, then we consider alternatives to direct military confrontation, the Emperor finished. "Very well. General Korthak, prepare a reconnaissance force. I want to know what we are truly facing before we commit to any course of action." As the council dispersed to carry out their assignments, Emperor Vexthal remained in his throne room, staring at the star charts that showed the vast extent of his domain. For 2 centuries, imperial expansion had proceeded according to predictable patterns. Resistance was met with overwhelming force, surrender was rewarded with integration into the imperial system, and the galaxy gradually fell under centralized control. Now, for the first time, the Empire faced an opponent that refused to follow those patterns. The humans had not surrendered when faced with superior force. They had not been crushed when isolated and besieged. Instead, they had used the time and pressure to transform themselves into something unprecedented. In 72 hours, the galaxy would discover whether humanity's threat was real or merely the desperate bluff of a trapped species. But Emperor Vexthal had ruled for long enough to recognize genuine danger when he encountered it, and everything about the human admiral's transmission suggested that the next few days would change the balance of galactic power forever. The question was no longer whether the humans could challenge the Empire. The question was whether the Empire could survive what was coming. 48 hours after Admiral Chen's ultimatum, the first Imperial probe force dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory. General Korthak had assembled what he considered an appropriately powerful reconnaissance fleet, 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and a full carrier group with fighter support. The force was commanded by Admiral Zexcali, a veteran of 17 conquest campaigns who had never encountered serious resistance from primitive species. Long-range sensors are active, reported the Talaxi sensor operator, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with concentration. Detecting multiple artificial gravity sources throughout the system, but the signatures are unusual. Admiral Zexcali studied the tactical display from his command throne aboard the dreadnought Inevitable Victory. The human system appeared far more developed than intelligence reports had suggested. Where their previous data showed a few orbital installations and basic industrial facilities, sensors now detected dozens of massive structures throughout the solar system. Specifications on those installations, he demanded. Uncertain, Admiral. The energy signatures don't match any known Imperial technology, and the structures themselves seem to be constructed using materials that partially absorb our scanning beams. We're getting incomplete readings on everything. Zexcali's serpentine neck extended slightly as he focused on the data streams. In his extensive experience, primitive species typically built simple, easily identifiable installations. What he was seeing suggested engineering capabilities that rivaled Imperial technology, which should have been impossible. What about defensive installations? Weapons platforms? That's also unclear, Admiral. We're detecting energy sources that could be weapons, but they're distributed throughout the system in patterns that don't match standard defensive doctrine. Some appear to be mobile, others seem to be integrated into the larger installations. The Admiral's scaled features reflected growing concern. Standard Imperial practice was to identify and catalog enemy defensive positions before advancing, but the humans seem to have designed their infrastructure to resist analysis. Send a message to the largest installation, he ordered. Standard Imperial identification protocols. Inform them that they are in violation of quarantine restrictions and demand immediate surrender. While communications worked to establish contact, Zexcali continued studying the sensor data. His tactical staff had identified at least 40 major installations throughout the system, with energy output suggesting industrial capacity that exceeded many Imperial sector capitals. Either the humans had achieved remarkable development during their isolation, or they were receiving assistance from an unknown source. Admiral, the communications officer reported, we are receiving a response to our demand. Display it. The main view screen activated to show another human face, this one belonging to a young woman with the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to crisis situations. She wore what appeared to be a military uniform, but the design was unlike anything in Imperial databases. Imperial forces, the human said without preamble, you are currently in violation of established territorial boundaries. You have 30 minutes to withdraw beyond the outer system perimeter or you will be classified as hostile and engaged accordingly. Admiral Zexcali's throat sac inflated with indignation. I am Admiral Zexcali of the Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences of resisting lawful Imperial authority. The human woman's expression remained unchanged. Admiral, I am Captain Torres of the Terran Defense Force. Your authority is not recognized in this system, and your presence here constitutes an act of aggression. You now have 29 minutes to withdraw. You dare threaten an Imperial fleet? Zexcali hissed. I have sufficient firepower to sterilize every installation in this system. Surrender now or face complete destruction. Captain Torres consulted what appeared to be a tactical display outside the transmission range. Admiral, you currently have 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and approximately 200 fighters under your command. Impressive by the standards of most species. However, you are now operating in a system that has spent nearly 50 years preparing specifically for this type of confrontation. The casual accuracy of her assessment sent a chill through the Imperial bridge crew. Their force composition was supposed to be classified information, yet this human had recited it as easily as reading from a display. How did you? Zexcali began, but Captain Torres continued speaking. Your ships are currently being tracked by 47 different sensor arrays throughout this system. Your weapons are being analyzed by our defensive networks, and your movement patterns are being fed into tactical computers that have modeled Imperial fleet behavior for decades. Admiral, you are not conducting a reconnaissance mission. You are walking into a carefully prepared trap. Admiral Zexcali studied the human's face, searching for signs of deception or uncertainty. He found neither. Like Admiral Chan before her, this human spoke with the confidence of someone stating established facts rather than making threats. Even if your claims are accurate, he said carefully, you cannot seriously believe that one system can challenge the might of the Imperial Navy. Admiral, Captain Torres replied, we don't need to challenge your entire navy. We only need to eliminate the portion of it that you brought here today. The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial bridge in stunned silence. Zexcali had expected either immediate surrender or desperate bluffing from primitives faced with overwhelming force. Instead, he had encountered calm professionalism and what appeared to be genuine confidence in their ability to destroy his fleet. Tactical assessment, he ordered. Commander Velkoroth, his primary tactical officer, consulted multiple displays before responding. Admiral, I am detecting energy buildups throughout the system. Whatever weapons the humans have deployed, they appear to be activating targeting systems. Show me. The tactical display updated to show the Imperial fleet's position relative to human installations. Red indicators began appearing throughout the system as sensors detected energy sources focusing on their location. The pattern was unlike anything Zexcali had encountered. Rather than concentrated defensive positions, the humans had distributed their weapons across dozens of platforms, creating overlapping fields of fire that would be difficult to neutralize. Time remaining on their ultimatum, he asked. 26 minutes, Admiral. Zexcali's military instincts warred with his political responsibilities. The probe force had been assembled to test human capabilities, not to engage in a full battle. But retreating after being threatened by primitives would be a devastating blow to Imperial prestige. Begin advancement toward their primary installation, he ordered. Combat speed. If they want to test their weapons against Imperial shields, let them try. The Imperial fleet began moving deeper into the human system, maintaining battle formation while sensors continued analyzing the energy signatures around them. As they advanced, more human installations became visible, revealing the true scope of their development. The humans had essentially militarized their entire solar system, turning every asteroid belt and orbital facility into potential defensive positions. Admiral, the sensor operator reported urgently, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from multiple vectors. Unknown contact types, moving at extreme velocity. The tactical display erupted with new contacts as dozens of objects emerged from various locations throughout the system. They moved with impossible speed and agility, their courses converging on the Imperial fleet from every direction. Missiles? Zexcali demanded. Unknown, sir. The energy signatures don't match any known propulsion system. They're too large to be missiles but too fast to be ships. And there are. The operator's bioluminescent patterns flickered rapidly as she processed the data. Admiral, I count over 200 inbound contacts. Zexcali's throat sac constricted with alarm. His fleet's defensive systems were designed to handle traditional missile attacks or fighter assaults, but the approaching objects defied easy classification. They were too numerous to be heavy weapons but too powerful to be standard projectiles. Time to contact? 14 minutes at current approach speed, Admiral. Signal all ships. Prepare for defensive action. I want point defense systems active and shield generators at maximum power. As the Imperial fleet prepared for combat, Captain Torres reappeared on the communication channel. Her expression remained calm, but there was something in her eyes that suggested satisfaction. Admiral Zexcali, she said, you now have approximately 13 minutes to withdraw from this system. After that point, our defensive systems will engage your fleet regardless of your intentions. What are those objects approaching my ships? Zexcali demanded. Autonomous defense platforms, Torres replied. Each one is equipped with weapons capable of penetrating Imperial heavy cruiser armor, along with defensive systems that have been specifically designed to counter your tactics. They were constructed using technology reverse-engineered from your own ships, then improved using human innovations. The implications were staggering. The humans had not only matched Imperial technology but had created automated weapons platforms that could operate independently. More troubling was the number of platforms approaching. If each one truly possessed cruiser-level firepower, they represented a threat that exceeded his fleet's defensive capabilities. "You're bluffing," Zexcali said, though his confidence was wavering. "No species achieved such technological advancement in mere decades." Captain Torres smiled for the first time, and the expression was not reassuring. "Admiral, your empire has spent centuries conquering species that developed according to normal patterns. You've never encountered a species that treats warfare as an engineering problem to be solved rather than a contest of courage to be won." The approaching objects were now visible on long-range viewers, and what Zexcali saw made his blood freeze. The platforms were sleek and deadly-looking, incorporating design elements that were clearly derived from Imperial technology but arranged in configurations that suggested capabilities beyond Imperial understanding. Worse, they moved with perfect coordination, executing complex maneuvers that would have challenged experienced pilots. 10 minutes to contact, the tactical officer reported. "Admiral," came a transmission from one of his destroyer captains, "we are detecting additional energy signatures throughout the system. The humans appear to have dozens of installations we haven't identified yet." Zexcali realized with growing horror that his reconnaissance mission had revealed the scope of human preparation. This wasn't a simple defensive system, it was a carefully designed trap that could potentially destroy his entire force. The humans had spent decades turning their solar system into a fortress specifically designed to counter Imperial tactics. 8 minutes to contact. "All ships," Zexcali ordered reluctantly, "prepare to withdraw. Set course for the outer system perimeter." But, as his fleet began to turn away from the advancing platforms, new contacts appeared on sensors. More human installations throughout the system were activating, revealing weapons that had remained hidden during the initial approach. Energy readings suggested that the humans possessed firepower equivalent to an Imperial battle fleet, distributed across dozens of platforms that could concentrate their fire on any target within the system. "Admiral," Captain Torres said, her voice carrying a note of warning, "you are now attempting to withdraw through a prepared engagement zone. For your own safety, I recommend you accept escort assistance from our platforms." "Escort assistance?" Zexcali repeated. "The safe navigation routes through this system change constantly due to automated defensive systems. Without proper guidance, your ships may inadvertently trigger additional responses." The Admiral found himself in an impossible situation. Advancing would mean engaging hundreds of defensive platforms with unknown capabilities. Retreating without assistance might trigger even more defensive systems. Either choice would demonstrate that the humans had achieved tactical superiority within their own system. 6 minutes to platform intercept. Zexcali made his decision. "Signal the human commander. We will accept escort assistance for withdrawal." The response came immediately. "Acknowledged, Admiral. Please maintain your current course and speed. Our platforms will adjust their approach to provide safe passage corridors." What followed was perhaps the most humiliating experience in Zexcali's long military career. The human defensive platforms smoothly altered their trajectories, creating clear lanes through which the Imperial fleet could withdraw. The platforms maintained precise formation around the Imperial ships, close enough to demonstrate their capability while providing clear evidence of their superior maneuverability. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported quietly, "I'm analyzing the platform movements. Their propulsion systems are achieving acceleration rates that should be impossible for objects of their apparent mass." "Meaning?" "Either they're using gravitational manipulation technology far beyond our capabilities, or they've achieved breakthroughs in inertial compensation that violate our understanding of physics." As the Imperial fleet reached the outer system perimeter, the human platforms smoothly disengaged, returning to their previous positions with mechanical precision. The entire escort operation had been conducted with a level of coordination and control that exceeded anything Zexcali had witnessed in Imperial forces. Captain Torres appeared on the communication channel one final time. "Admiral Zexcali, your fleet is now beyond the territorial boundary. Please convey to your superiors that this demonstration represents only a fraction of current human defensive capabilities. Any future incursions will be met with more direct responses." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zexcali staring at sensor displays that showed hundreds of energy signatures throughout the human system. His reconnaissance mission had achieved its objective of assessing human capabilities, but the results were far worse than anyone had anticipated. Set course for Imperial space, he ordered grimly. Maximum speed. As his fleet jumped to hyperspace, Zexcali began composing his report to Imperial Command. The humans were no longer the primitive species that had been contained 50 years earlier. They had transformed themselves into something unprecedented, a fortress civilization that had weaponized an entire star system using technology that matched or exceeded Imperial capabilities. Back on Earth, Captain Torres observed the departing Imperial fleet from her command center deep within the Sol defense complex. Around her, hundreds of technicians monitored displays that showed the status of defensive systems throughout the solar system. Platform efficiency report, she asked. All systems performed within optimal parameters, replied her tactical coordinator. The demonstration achieved maximum psychological impact while revealing minimal information about actual capabilities. Torres nodded with satisfaction. The Imperial probe had seen exactly what humanity wanted them to see: overwhelming defensive capability that suggested futile any direct assault on Earth. What they hadn't seen were the mobile fleets that had been constructed in hidden shipyards throughout the outer system, or the strategic weapons that could project force far beyond the boundaries of human space. Time until the Imperial ultimatum expires, she asked. 23 hours, 47 minutes. Signal Admiral Chen. The Empire has now seen our defensive capabilities. When they fail to meet our demands, they'll discover what our offensive capabilities can accomplish. The chess pieces were moving across a galactic board, and humanity had spent 50 years planning their opening moves. The Imperial probe had provided valuable intelligence about current Imperial fleet capabilities and tactics, while demonstrating that Earth could not be conquered by conventional assault. Now came the more difficult part of the plan, proving that humanity could project force across galactic distances and carry out their threat to reduce Imperial planets to ash. The siege of Earth was about to end, but the war for galactic freedom was just beginning. In shipyards hidden throughout the outer solar system, fleets that had been under construction for decades were completing their final preparations. Ships that incorporated the best of both human innovation and captured Imperial technology, crewed by personnel who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays from her flagship, a vessel that exceeded Imperial dreadnought specifications while maintaining the speed and maneuverability of a heavy cruiser. Around her, similar ships were emerging from concealment, revealing the true scope of human preparation. Fleet status, she asked. All vessels report ready for departure, came the reply. Target coordinates have been distributed, and strike groups are prepared for simultaneous emergence. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. The Empire had 24 hours to begin withdrawing from conquered territories. When that deadline passed, they would discover why humanity had never lost a war they considered necessary to win. The demonstration at Earth had been carefully calculated to show Imperial forces what they faced if they attempted invasion. The next demonstration would show them what they faced if they refused to withdraw from conquered space. Across the galaxy, Imperial commanders were about to learn the difference between facing a primitive species fighting for survival and confronting a technological civilization that had spent half a century preparing for total war. 73 hours after Admiral Chen's ultimatum, the Imperial response arrived at Earth in the form of a heavily encrypted transmission. Emperor Vexthal appeared on screens throughout the human system, his reptilian features set in an expression of Imperial authority that had intimidated countless species across the galaxy. To the leadership of the Terran species, the Emperor began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute power. The Galactic Empire acknowledges receipt of your demands. After careful consideration of your claims and assessment of your capabilities, we offer the following response. Admiral Chen watched the transmission from her command ship, surrounded by her senior staff as they prepared to launch the largest military operation in human history. The Emperor's words would determine whether their carefully planned demonstration would remain a show of force or escalate into something far more devastating. Your request for Imperial withdrawal from conquered territories is denied, the Emperor continued. Your demand for the liberation of enslaved populations is rejected. Your ultimatum regarding the cessation of expansion operations is dismissed as the desperate bluffing of a contained species. Around Admiral Chen, her officers exchanged glances. They had expected this response, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill through the human command structure. The Empire had chosen war over diplomacy, despite having witnessed human defensive capabilities. Furthermore, Emperor Vexthal said, his golden eyes narrowing with malicious satisfaction, the Empire hereby declares the Terran species to be in violation of containment protocols. Your aggressive posturing and terrorist threats against lawful Imperial authority cannot be tolerated. Therefore, effective immediately, all restrictions on offensive action against your system are removed. The transmission shifted to show Imperial fleet movements throughout nearby space. Massive formations of ships were converging on human territory from multiple directions, representing a force large enough to overwhelm any conventional defense. You will have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally, the Emperor concluded. After that time, Imperial forces will proceed with the complete pacification of your system and the enslavement of any surviving population. Your choice is simple: submit or face total annihilation. The transmission ended, leaving the human command center in grim silence. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display showing Imperial fleet movements, calculating numbers and trajectories with the precision of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact scenario. Assessment, she asked her tactical coordinator. Commander Williams consulted multiple data streams before responding. They're committing approximately 30% of their mobile forces to the operation, Admiral. 700 ships in the initial wave, with reserve staging in adjacent sectors. It's the largest concentration of Imperial firepower ever assembled against a single target. Time to arrival? 46 hours at their current speed. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. The Empire's response was exactly what human strategic planning had anticipated. Faced with an unexpected challenge to their authority, they were responding with overwhelming force rather than considering the possibility that their opponents might have prepared for such an escalation. Signal all strike groups, she ordered. Operation Thunderbolt is now active. Begin deployment to designated target systems. Throughout the outer solar system, human fleets that had remained hidden for decades began emerging from concealment. Ships that incorporated 50 years of technological development and tactical innovation, crewed by personnel who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering, combining reverse-engineered Imperial technology with innovations that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The fleet that Admiral Chen had assembled represented the culmination of humanity's longest and most intensive military preparation. Unlike the defensive platforms that had escorted Admiral Zexcali's probe force away from Earth, these were offensive weapons designed to project force across galactic distances and engage targets that had never imagined they could be threatened. Fleet status report, Admiral Chen requested. Strike Group Alpha reports ready for jump to the Cardin Industrial Complex, came the first report. 43 ships including the Dreadnought Retribution and 2 carrier groups. Strike Group Beta ready for deployment to Zentera Prime, came the second report. 37 ships including the Battleship Determination and specialized planetary bombardment units. Strike Group Gamma prepared for assault on the Morlack shipyards, reported the third coordinator. 51 ships including the heavy cruiser Vengeance and multiple torpedo squadrons. The reports continued as human strike groups throughout the system confirmed their readiness to launch simultaneous attacks against Imperial targets across hundreds of light years. Each group had been assigned specific objectives based on detailed intelligence gathered during 50 years of observation and analysis. Admiral, Commander Williams said quietly, once we begin this operation, there's no possibility of negotiation or compromise. The Empire will either submit to our demands or we'll be committed to a war of extermination. Admiral Chen studied the faces of her senior officers, seeing the mixture of determination and apprehension that she felt herself. What they were about to attempt had never been tried in galactic history, a single species challenging an established empire through coordinated strikes against strategic targets across vast distances. Are you having doubts, Commander? She asked. Williams shook his head. No, Admiral. Just acknowledging the magnitude of what we're undertaking. In the next few hours, humanity will either achieve the liberation of dozens of species or face complete destruction. Then, let's make sure it's the former, Chen replied. All strike groups, begin jump sequences. Target coordinates are confirmed and engagement protocols are active. Show the Empire what happens when they mistake human patience for human weakness. The first human fleet to jump was Strike Group Alpha, commanded by Admiral Harrison aboard the Dreadnought Retribution. Their target was the Cardin Industrial Complex, a massive manufacturing center that produced approximately 15% of Imperial military hardware. The system was heavily fortified and considered impregnable by Imperial strategic planners. Admiral Harrison had studied the Cardin system for 20 years, analyzing every defensive installation and identifying vulnerabilities that Imperial commanders had never considered. His fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, immediately beginning the complex dance of coordinated warfare that human forces had perfected during decades of preparation. "Contact with Imperial forces in 3 minutes," reported his tactical officer. "Defensive platforms are activating and mobile units are moving to intercept." The Cardan system's defenses were impressive by any standard: orbital weapons platforms, automated defense networks, and a permanent garrison of Imperial ships. Against conventional attackers, these defenses would have been nearly impossible to overcome. But the human forces approaching Cardan had been designed specifically to counter Imperial defensive doctrine. "Deploy stealth units," Harrison ordered. "Begin electronic warfare operations and activate shield penetration systems." What followed was unlike any battle Imperial forces had ever experienced. Human ships that seemed to appear and disappear at will, weapons that bypassed defensive shields using principles Imperial technology couldn't counter, and tactical coordination that made Imperial forces seem clumsy and predictable in comparison. The first Imperial defensive platform was destroyed within minutes of engagement, its massive structure crumpling under weapons fire that penetrated its shields as if they didn't exist. The second platform managed to return fire, but its targeting systems couldn't lock onto human ships that seemed to bend the laws of physics with their maneuverability. "Imperial garrison forces are attempting to engage," reported Harrison's tactical coordinator. 12 heavy cruisers and supporting units. "They're maintaining traditional formation patterns." Admiral Harrison smiled grimly. Imperial military doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower and massive defensive formations. It was a strategy that worked well against species that fought using similar principles. Against human forces that had been designed to exploit the weaknesses of such tactics, it was almost suicidal. "Engage with Wolfpack Delta," he ordered. "Show them why human tactical innovation is more valuable than Imperial firepower." Wolfpack Delta consisted of 6 human destroyers that had been equipped with advanced stealth systems and weapons designed to penetrate heavy armor. They moved through the Imperial formation like predators hunting prey, striking at vulnerable points and disappearing before return fire could be effectively targeted. Within 20 minutes, the Imperial garrison had been reduced to debris and escape pods. The massive industrial installations that had supplied the Imperial war machine for decades were now defenseless against human forces that had traveled hundreds of light-years specifically to destroy them. "Begin bombardment of primary manufacturing facilities," Admiral Harrison ordered. "Military targets only. Avoid civilian casualties." The destruction of the Cardan industrial complex was methodical and complete. Human forces used precisely targeted weapons to eliminate shipyards, weapons manufacturing plants, and supply depots while carefully avoiding residential areas and civilian infrastructure. It was a demonstration of surgical precision that would have been impossible for Imperial forces. Simultaneously, across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as human strike groups engaged targets throughout Imperial space. On Zentera Prime, Admiral Rodriguez led Strike Group Beta in an assault on the crystal mining operations that provided raw materials for Imperial technology. At the Morlack shipyards, Admiral Patel coordinated the destruction of facilities that constructed Imperial battle fleets. Each attack followed the same pattern: sudden appearance of human forces, overwhelming of Imperial defenses using superior technology and tactics, destruction of military and industrial targets, and withdrawal before Imperial reinforcements could arrive. It was a coordinated campaign of strategic destruction that demonstrated capabilities the Empire had never imagined possible. Emperor Vexthal received the first reports of human attacks while reviewing plans for the assault on Earth. What he heard made him question whether his own military advisors were suffering from collective delusion. "Repeat that report," he demanded. General Korthak's forearms gestured helplessly as he consulted multiple data streams. "Excellency, we have confirmed attacks against 17 major Imperial installations across 8 different sectors. The human forces appear to have struck simultaneously across hundreds of light-years, suggesting coordination and deployment capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates." "How many ships?" the Emperor demanded. "Unknown, Excellency. The attacks were so rapid that local commanders could not provide accurate counts before communications were severed. Initial estimates suggest humans deployed between 3 and 500 vessels, but that seems impossible given their supposed isolation." Emperor Vexthal's claws extended fully as he processed the implications. The humans had not only developed defensive capabilities that could resist Imperial assault, but they had somehow constructed offensive fleets capable of projecting force across galactic distances. Worse, they had done so without Imperial intelligence detecting the construction or movement of such forces. Casualties, he asked. Minimal, Excellency. The humans appear to have specifically targeted military and industrial installations while avoiding civilian areas. Preliminary reports suggest they were more interested in destroying our capabilities than killing our people. And our defensive forces? General Korthak's mandibles clicked nervously. Completely overwhelmed in every engagement. Human tactical capabilities appear to exceed our current understanding of possible combat efficiency. The Emperor stared at the tactical displays showing the locations of human attacks. The pattern was clear and terrifying. Every installation struck was crucial to Imperial military capability. The humans had identified the most critical components of Imperial infrastructure and attacked them simultaneously with surgical precision. Time until our assault fleet reaches Earth, he asked. 38 hours, Excellency. Signal the fleet commanders. They are to proceed with maximum caution and be prepared for capabilities far beyond initial intelligence estimates. But, even as the Emperor spoke, he was beginning to understand that the situation had fundamentally changed. The humans had demonstrated that they could strike Imperial targets across vast distances with impunity. More troubling, they had done so while maintaining moral restraint that showed they were not interested in conquest but were capable of far more destruction than they had chosen to inflict. Meanwhile, aboard the human command ship approaching Earth's orbital defenses, Admiral Chan received status reports from her strike groups throughout the galaxy. Operation Thunderbolt Phase 1 is complete, Commander Williams reported. All primary targets eliminated with minimal casualties. Imperial response forces are beginning to mobilize, but they're facing coordination problems due to communications disruption. Any indication that the Empire is reconsidering their position? Chen asked. Negative. Their assault fleet is still approaching our system on schedule. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing Imperial fleet movements. Despite having witnessed human capabilities firsthand, the Empire was still committed to their assault on Earth. It was time to demonstrate that humanity's defensive preparations were as advanced as their offensive capabilities. Signal all defensive platforms, she ordered. Imperial forces will arrive in 36 hours. I want them to face the most comprehensive defensive network in galactic history. As human strike groups continued their coordinated attacks across Imperial space, Earth's defenses prepared to demonstrate why 50 years of isolation had been humanity's greatest strategic advantage. The Empire was about to discover that the species they had trapped in a single system had used their confinement to perfect the art of warfare itself. The next phase of the conflict would determine whether humanity's strategy of surgical destruction could force Imperial surrender, or whether the galaxy would witness the first total war between civilizations that possessed the technology to reduce entire star systems to ash. The Imperial assault fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system exactly 48 hours after Emperor Vexthal's ultimatum expired. Admiral Mordeth, commanding from the super dreadnought Divine Retribution, surveyed what he expected to find, a primitive system defended by obsolete technology and desperate courage. What he actually discovered made him question the accuracy of his sensors. Tactical analysis, he demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems for the Empire. Lieutenant Commander Calvash, a Zentarian whose crystalline structure allowed direct interface with ship sensors, pulsed with agitation as she processed the data. Admiral, I'm detecting energy signatures throughout the system that exceed theoretical maximums for power generation. The humans appear to have militarized not just their orbital space, but their entire star system. Admiral Mordeth studied the tactical display with growing unease. Where intelligence reports had indicated a few dozen defensive installations, sensors now showed hundreds of platforms, weapons arrays, and mobile units distributed throughout human space. More troubling was the sophistication of their positioning. Every asteroid belt, moon, and orbital facility had been converted into potential defensive positions. How many defensive platforms? He asked. Unknown, Admiral. Our sensors are being actively jammed by systems that appear to operate on principles we don't recognize. Conservative estimates suggest at least 300 major installations, but the actual number could be significantly higher. Admiral Mordeth had commanded Imperial fleets for 3 decades, overwhelming primitive defenses and crushing resistance through superior firepower. But what he was seeing suggested that the humans had spent their 50 years of isolation creating something unprecedented, a fortress civilization that had weaponized an entire star system. Signal from the human command, reported Communications Officer Veltar. They're requesting dialogue. Put it through. The main view screen activated to show Admiral Chen aboard her command vessel, the background revealing a bridge that incorporated technology Admiral Mordeth didn't recognize. Her calm demeanor was identical to the confidence displayed in her initial ultimatum, suggesting that the presence of 700 Imperial ships had not altered her assessment of the tactical situation. Admiral Mordeth, she began without preamble, welcome to Sol System. I trust your journey was uneventful. Admiral Chen, Mordeth replied, his serpentine features set in an expression of Imperial authority. You are in violation of Imperial containment protocols. Surrender your forces immediately and prepare for occupation. Admiral Chen's expression remained unchanged. Admiral, I assume you've reviewed reports from Imperial commanders who encountered our defensive systems during their reconnaissance mission. You're now operating in that same environment, except that you've brought a force large enough to be classified as an invasion fleet. Your defensive capabilities are irrelevant, Mordeth stated. I command 700 ships with sufficient firepower to reduce your entire system to asteroids. Surrender now or face complete annihilation. Admiral, Chen replied, let me clarify your current tactical situation. Your fleet is currently being tracked by defensive systems that have been specifically designed to counter Imperial technology and tactics. Every ship in your formation has been analyzed, classified, and targeted by weapons that your shields cannot deflect. Admiral Mordeth studied the human admiral's face, searching for signs of deception or uncertainty. Like every human he had encountered in intelligence briefings, she spoke with calm certainty that suggested genuine confidence rather than desperate bluffing. More importantly, Chen continued, while you've been traveling to this system, human forces have been conducting operations throughout Imperial space. Perhaps you should check with your command regarding the current status of your military infrastructure. A chill ran down Mordeth's spine as he processed the implications. The fleet's communications with Imperial Command had been sporadic during their journey, but he had attributed that to normal hyperspace interference. Communications Officer, he ordered, establish priority contact with Imperial Command. I want a full status report on our strategic position. What followed was perhaps the most disturbing intelligence briefing in Imperial military history. Over the past 48 hours, human forces had conducted coordinated strikes against 37 major Imperial installations across 12 sectors. Shipyards, industrial complexes, supply depots, and command centers had been systematically destroyed with surgical precision that exceeded anything Imperial forces had ever witnessed. Damage assessment? Admiral Mordeth demanded, his voice tight with suppressed panic. Catastrophic, Admiral, came the reply from Imperial Command. The humans have eliminated approximately 40% of our industrial capacity and 60% of our shipbuilding infrastructure. Current estimates suggest it would take 15 to 20 years to rebuild what they destroyed in 2 days. Admiral Mordeth found himself staring at tactical displays that showed the true scope of human operations. While he had been traveling to assault their home system, they had been systematically dismantling the Empire's ability to sustain military operations. It was a strategic masterstroke that demonstrated planning capabilities far beyond anything Imperial intelligence had detected. Admiral Chen, he said, turning back to the communication channel, what are your terms? The human admiral's expression softened slightly, suggesting satisfaction rather than triumph. The same terms we offered 72 hours ago, Admiral. Complete withdrawal of Imperial forces from all conquered territories, liberation of enslaved populations, and cessation of expansion operations. The only difference is that you now have a clearer understanding of the consequences if these terms are rejected. And, if the Empire refuses? Mordeth asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Then, we continue operations until Imperial military capacity is reduced to the point where compliance becomes inevitable, Chen replied. Admiral, we don't want to destroy your civilization, but we will eliminate your ability to threaten others. Admiral Mordeth consulted his tactical displays, calculating the odds of successfully completing his mission. 700 ships represented massive firepower by any standard, but the humans had demonstrated capabilities that made conventional assessment meaningless. Worse, even if he somehow managed to overwhelm their defenses, the strategic situation had fundamentally changed. Admiral Chen, he said carefully, I lack the authority to negotiate on behalf of the Empire. Such decisions must come from the Emperor himself. Understood, Chen replied. However, your fleet's presence in this system constitutes an act of aggression under the terms we've established. You have 12 hours to withdraw beyond the outer system perimeter or will be forced to treat you as a hostile force. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Mordeth facing the most difficult decision of his military career. His orders were clear: destroy human resistance and prepare for Imperial occupation. But the strategic situation was no longer what it had been when those orders were issued. Options, he asked his senior staff. Commander Zalkorath, his tactical officer, consulted multiple displays before responding. Admiral, if the human defensive capabilities match what we witnessed during the reconnaissance mission, we lack sufficient force to overcome their defenses. More critically, even if we succeed, the Empire no longer possesses the infrastructure to support occupation operations. Meaning? The humans have essentially eliminated our ability to maintain extended military operations. We could potentially destroy their system, but we couldn't hold it or integrate it into Imperial space. Admiral Mordeth processed the implications with growing despair. The humans had not only achieved defensive parity with Imperial forces, they had demonstrated offensive capabilities that could project force across galactic distances. More devastating was their apparent understanding of Imperial strategic vulnerabilities. Signal Imperial Command, he ordered. Priority communication with the Emperor. We need strategic guidance for a situation that was not anticipated in our operational planning. Emperor Vexthal received Admiral Mordeth's report while reviewing damage assessments from across Imperial space. The scope of human operations was staggering. They had somehow identified and struck the most critical components of Imperial infrastructure with precision that suggested decades of intelligence gathering and strategic planning. Your assessment of the tactical situation, the Emperor asked. Excellency, the humans have achieved strategic superiority through methods we don't fully understand, Admiral Mordeth replied. Their defensive capabilities appear to exceed our offensive capacity, and their demonstrated ability to strike targets throughout Imperial space suggests they could continue operations indefinitely. Are you recommending retreat? The Emperor asked, his golden eyes narrowing dangerously. Admiral Mordeth considered his words carefully. Excellency, I'm recommending strategic reassessment. The humans have demonstrated that they possess both the capability and will to carry out their threats. Continuing operations under current conditions could result in complete destruction of Imperial military forces without achieving operational objectives. Emperor Vexthal stared at the strategic displays showing the extent of human attacks. In 48 hours, a single species had accomplished what no enemy in Imperial history had managed: systematic destruction of Imperial military infrastructure across multiple sectors simultaneously. What of our mobile forces? He asked General Korthak. Currently engaged in damage assessment and defensive operations, Excellency, the general replied. The humans struck so many targets simultaneously that our forces are scattered throughout Imperial space trying to assess casualties and restore communications. Time required to concentrate sufficient forces for a decisive campaign against Earth? General Korthak's mandibles clicked nervously as he calculated. Given current damage to our infrastructure and the need to maintain garrison forces on rebellious worlds, 18 to 24 months, Excellency. And the likelihood that the humans will remain passive during that period? The silence that followed answered the Emperor's question. If the humans could conduct coordinated operations across dozens of sectors while defending their home system, they could certainly continue such operations while Imperial forces attempted to reorganize. Excellency, Science Advisor Kelnara interjected, analysis of human technological capabilities suggests they have achieved breakthroughs in multiple areas that exceed our current understanding. Their weapons, shields, propulsion systems, and coordination networks all operate on principles that we haven't mastered. Meaning? The technological gap may be irreversible, Excellency. While we developed our capabilities through conquest and integration of existing technologies, the humans appear to have achieved genuine innovation. They're not using better versions of our technology, they're using different technology entirely. Emperor Vexthal felt the weight of Imperial history pressing down on him. For 3 centuries, the Empire had expanded through overwhelming force and superior technology. Now they faced an opponent that had turned their own advantages against them. Options, he asked his assembled advisors. The council chamber fell silent as each advisor considered the unprecedented situation. Finally, General Korthak spoke. We could attempt to negotiate a limited compromise. Withdraw from some contested territories in exchange for an end to human operations. Unacceptable, the Emperor replied immediately. Imperial authority cannot be seen as negotiable. Then, we face continued operations against targets throughout Imperial space, Kalnara said quietly. The humans have demonstrated that they can strike any installation we possess, and our current defensive capabilities are insufficient to prevent such attacks. What about our client species? Asked Chancellor Morvel. Could we mobilize additional forces from conquered populations? General Korthak's expression grew grim. Intelligence reports suggest that news of human operations is spreading throughout Imperial space. We're detecting increased resistance activity on 17 worlds, and 3 sectors have reported communication blackouts that suggest coordinated rebellion. Emperor Vexthal realized with growing horror that the humans had achieved something far more devastating than military victory. They had demonstrated that the Empire could be challenged successfully, and that demonstration was spreading throughout Imperial space like a virus. Signal Admiral Mordeth, he ordered finally. He is to request formal negotiations with the human leadership. We will explore diplomatic alternatives to continued military operations. The words felt like poison in the Emperor's throat, but the strategic reality was clear. The Empire faced an enemy that could not be defeated by conventional means, and continuing the conflict would likely result in complete destruction of Imperial military capacity. As the Emperor's reluctant authorization for negotiations traveled across space to Admiral Mordeth's fleet, the first phase of humanity's war for galactic liberation was drawing to a close. The siege of Earth was over, but the real test would come in convincing an empire that had never negotiated as equals to accept terms that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Admiral Chan received Admiral Mordeth's request for formal negotiations while reviewing reports from human strike groups throughout Imperial space. Phase 2 of Operation Thunderbolt was proceeding ahead of schedule, with minimal casualties and maximum strategic impact. Your assessment, she asked Commander Williams. The Empire appears to be genuinely seeking diplomatic alternatives, he replied. Intelligence intercepts suggest significant disagreement within their leadership regarding how to respond to our operations. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays showing Imperial fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The Empire's forces were scattered and disorganized, struggling to respond to threats that appeared and disappeared across vast distances. Signal Admiral Mordeth, she ordered. We're prepared to discuss terms, but negotiations will be conducted under specific conditions that demonstrate good faith regarding implementation of our original demands. The chess game between humanity and the Galactic Empire was entering its final phase, with both sides understanding that the outcome would determine the future of every species in the galaxy. The negotiations took place aboard a neutral space station that the humans constructed in the void between Imperial and Terran space. The facility itself was a demonstration of human technological capabilities assembled in less than 72 hours from prefabricated components. It incorporated defensive systems that could resist Imperial assault while providing comfortable accommodations for representatives from dozens of species. Emperor Vexthal arrived with a delegation that represented the most powerful military and political figures in Imperial hierarchy. Admiral Chan met them with representatives from Terra and, more significantly, from 17 different species that had been fighting Imperial occupation for decades. The symbolic message was clear: this was not a bilateral negotiation between the Empire and humanity, but a multilateral discussion about the future of galactic civilization. Emperor Vexthal, Admiral Chin said as the negotiations began, "Thank you for agreeing to explore diplomatic solutions to our current situation." The Emperor's golden eyes reflected barely controlled rage, but his voice remained level. Admiral Chen, the Empire comes to these negotiations from a position of strength. Your recent operations, while impressive, represent tactical victories rather than strategic dominance. Admiral Chen nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate that perspective, Emperor. However, before we discuss strategic positions, perhaps we should review the current tactical situation. The holographic display activated to show real-time intelligence from across Imperial space. Over the past week, human forces had continued their systematic destruction of Imperial military infrastructure, expanding their operations to include shipyards, research facilities, and command centers that the Empire had considered absolutely secure. As of this morning, Qin continued, Imperial military production capacity has been reduced by 73%. Shipbuilding capabilities are at 18% of previous levels. Strategic communications networks are operating at 40% efficiency due to the destruction of relay stations. Emperor Vexthal studied the data with growing dismay. Each installation shown on the display represented decades of construction and enormous resource investment. More troubling was the precision of the targeting. The humans had somehow identified the most critical components of Imperial infrastructure and eliminated them with surgical accuracy. Furthermore, Admiral Chen said, our intelligence networks indicate that resistance movements on 43 Imperial worlds have received detailed information about Imperial military weaknesses. Several sectors are experiencing coordinated uprisings that Imperial garrison forces are struggling to contain. The implications were staggering. The humans had not only demonstrated their ability to destroy Imperial infrastructure, but they had shared intelligence with resistance movements throughout Imperial space. The Empire was facing simultaneous challenges on multiple fronts while lacking the military capacity to respond effectively. Your point? Emperor Vexthal asked. My point, Chen replied, is that the Empire's strategic position deteriorates with every hour that passes. We're prepared to discuss terms that would halt our operations and stabilize the situation, but those terms must include meaningful changes to Imperial policies. General Korthek, representing Imperial military interests, gestured with his forearms in a display of controlled frustration. Admiral Chen, even if we agree to some territorial concessions, the Empire cannot simply abandon established policy regarding conquered populations. Why not? Asked Ambassador Velcara, a representative from Zentera Prime whose species had been enslaved by the Empire for over a century. Imperial policy has brought nothing but suffering to billions of individuals across dozens of worlds. The Emperor's tail lashed once, a sign of deep irritation. Ambassador, Imperial integration policies have brought stability and order to chaotic regions of the galaxy. Without Imperial administration, most of these worlds would collapse into warfare and anarchy. That's an interesting hypothesis, Admiral Chen said. However, our research suggests that most Imperial territorial integration campaigns were motivated by resource acquisition rather than humanitarian concerns. A holographic display shifted to show economic data compiled by human intelligence services. The information revealed the true scope of Imperial resource extraction from conquered worlds, massive transfers of wealth, raw materials, and technological expertise that had enriched the Imperial core while impoverishing occupied territories. Over the past 2 centuries, Chen continued, Imperial policies have extracted approximately 47 trillion credits worth of resources from conquered worlds while investing less than 3 trillion in infrastructure development. The mathematical relationship suggests exploitation rather than administration. Chancellor Morvel, the Empire's chief political advisor, shifted uncomfortably as he reviewed the data. Admiral Chen, those figures don't account for the costs of maintaining stability and providing security for developing civilizations. Actually, they do, replied Dr. Sarah Kim, humanities chief economist. We've calculated the full costs of Imperial administrative and security operations. Even accounting for those expenses, the net transfer from conquered worlds to Imperial core territories exceeds 40 trillion credits. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in Imperial history, their policies were being subjected to detailed economic analysis by an external power with access to comprehensive data. The results painted a picture of systematic exploitation that Imperial propaganda had carefully concealed. These numbers are irrelevant, Emperor Vexthal said finally. Imperial policies are based on strategic necessities rather than economic calculations. Then, let's discuss strategic necessities, Admiral Chen replied. What strategic purpose is served by enslaving populations that could contribute more to galactic civilization as free partners? The question struck at the heart of Imperial ideology. For 3 centuries, the Empire had justified conquest and enslavement as necessary measures for maintaining galactic order. But the humans were challenging the fundamental assumptions that supported Imperial expansion. Admiral Chen, science advisor Kelnara interjected, Imperial integration has prevented countless conflicts between competing species. Without unified administration, the galaxy would be consumed by warfare. Would it? Asked Dr. James Rodriguez, humanities specialist in comparative government. Our analysis suggests that most interspecies conflicts in galactic history have resulted from Imperial expansion policies rather than natural antagonisms between civilizations. The holographic display now showed historical data spanning 3 centuries of galactic conflicts. The pattern was clear: most wars had been either Imperial conquest campaigns or resistance movements fighting Imperial occupation. Independent conflicts between free species were relatively rare. What you're seeing, Dr. Rodriguez continued, is evidence that imperial policies have actually created instability by forcing diverse civilizations into administrative structures that ignore their natural development patterns. Emperor Vexthal found himself confronting information that challenged everything he believed about imperial necessity. The idea that the Empire might be the primary source of galactic instability rather than its solution was almost inconceivable. Even if your analysis is accurate, he said carefully, the Empire cannot simply abandon territories that have been integrated for decades or centuries. The administrative complexity would be staggering. Actually, Admiral Chen said, we've prepared detailed transition plans for every imperial territory. The display shifted again to show comprehensive data on each conquered world: population demographics, resource distribution, technological development levels, and proposed governmental structures. The scope of the analysis was breathtaking, suggesting that the humans had spent decades studying every aspect of imperial administration. How did you acquire this information? General Korthak demanded. 50 years of careful observation, Chen replied. While your empire was expanding, we were learning everything we could about how it functions. We've mapped your administrative structures, analyzed your economic systems, and identified optimal transition strategies for every conquered territory. Ambassador Velcara leaned forward with obvious excitement. Admiral Chen, are you suggesting that humanity has developed practical plans for imperial withdrawal from occupied territories? More than that, Chen replied. We've developed comprehensive frameworks for transitional governments, economic stabilization programs, and interspecies cooperation agreements that would allow former imperial territories to maintain stability while regaining independence. The implications were staggering. The humans had not only demonstrated the capability to destroy imperial military forces, but they had prepared detailed alternatives to imperial administration. It was strategic thinking on a scale that exceeded anything in imperial history. This is impossible, Chancellor Morvel protested. No single species could develop such comprehensive understanding of galactic administration. You're correct, Admiral Chen said with a slight smile. We didn't develop these plans alone. The final revelation was perhaps the most shocking of all. For the past 20 years, humanity had been in secret communication with resistance movements, exiled governments, and independent species throughout the galaxy. The comprehensive transition plans represented collaborative effort involving hundreds of civilizations that had been working together to prepare for imperial withdrawal. The network of civilizations supporting our operations includes representatives from every imperial sector, Chen explained. What you've been seeing as human military capability is actually the coordinated effort of a galactic alliance that has been preparing for this moment for decades. Emperor Vexthal stared at the display showing the extent of the anti-imperial network. Species that he had believed to be pacified were revealed as active participants in a galactic resistance movement. Independent civilizations that the Empire had dismissed as irrelevant were shown to be providing technological and logistical support for human operations. How many species? He asked quietly. Currently? 87 independent civilizations and resistance movements representing approximately 60% of the galaxy's population, Chen replied. The Empire's apparent dominance has been an illusion for decades. Most of the galaxy has been preparing for your downfall. The negotiation continued for 6 more hours, but the fundamental dynamic had been established. The Empire faced an opponent that possessed not only superior military capability but comprehensive plans for galactic reorganization. More devastating was the revelation that imperial dominance had been largely fictional. A significant portion of the galaxy had been actively preparing for rebellion. Emperor Vexthal found himself confronting a choice between negotiated withdrawal and inevitable destruction. The humans and their allies possessed the capability to systematically dismantle imperial infrastructure while offering practical alternatives for maintaining galactic stability. What exactly are you proposing? He asked finally. Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. Complete imperial withdrawal to your original territorial boundaries. Liberation of all enslaved populations with transitional support for new governments. Cessation of expansion operations and conversion to a cooperative model for interspecies relations. And, in exchange? An end to military operations against imperial targets and inclusion of the Empire as an equal partner in a new galactic confederation. You maintain sovereignty over your original territories while participating in cooperative governance structures that benefit all species. And, if we refuse? Chen's expression hardened.